On remote from the enchanted country of Ireland, it's Beyond the Near Horizon, featuring Colonel Stephen Prather. Now here's your host, Colonel Stephen Prather.
Thank you, Stephanie. From overseas, welcome to our listeners wherever they may dwell on the lonesome and journeying orb we call planet Earth. It is Sunday, October 31st, All Hallows Eve. And we transmit to you today from the shores of ancient kingdoms, home of Queen Boudica of the Iceni, of warrior and demigod Kukul, and you do not get more dark and mystical than this enchanted land, my friends. And we're happy to be here, specifically at the Tarnished Scepter, a Korean-Mexican fusion restaurant next to the buried Finch Gardens in the storied city of Galway, Ireland. Failed tennis pro Phil Prather was nice enough to set us up here and was serving as our grip, I guess you would say. Just got arrested for public indecency, or the Irish equivalent, I suppose. Public indecency with a traffic bollard, I believe I heard. We've got a nice old couple from, what is it? Donegal, who picked up the slack. Dolores and Matthew. Matthew looks like he's flagging a little. I'll tell you, in animal stock and people, drool is a telltale sign of exhaustion, 100% of the time. And Matthew is dripping like a shoulder-bit antelope there. Just a word of the wise, Matthew, wrap that power cord around your shoulder vertically. That will help distribute the weight. Oh, Dolores, you may want to lay him on his side. It looks like he's starting to foam out of the mouth there. Well, that aside, our guest joining us tonight on the Emerald Isle is the winner of the 1981 Edinburgh Unidentifiable Liquids Competition. She's author of many works, including Radium Sun, the East Coast Irradiated Surfer Epidemic, Yucca Plant, Secret Invaders, one of my favorites, and her latest work, Apocolypse 1983. That's Professor Tasha Gilmoyle, fellow at the Kilkenny Institute of Involuntary Energy. And I think you're going to find her pretty darn fascinating. I also understand she refines her own petroleum, so that's probably worth sticking around for alone. We've had quite the adventure getting here. It was 10 hours flying into Heathrow, and Yuri and I followed that with a hopper to Dublin, and then the train over to Galway here. I eventually made my way through most of a copy of the Times, London, and if you didn't guess it from the dramatic look of the sky in these parts, baby, there are some grade A portents in the air. Well, first of all, we were 100%, without a doubt, tailed out of Heathrow, which, given my position, I'm used to. I'd describe this fellow in a dirty tan raincoat as a sort of stretched out Walter Matthau in terms of his facial appearance. And he had at least 3 different copies of Mayfair rolled up in his pockets, which he seemed to circulate through. And for the uninitiated, that would be your English equivalent of Playboy magazine. And Mayfair, if you don't know, is underwritten by the most aerial order of Turkish Unity ministers, who originally hail from San Jose. They're the sort of head honchos, Art and Ollie, if I'm not mistaken, the Arden brothers, were booted out of the Unitarian Universalist Church out there in Cali when they refused to relent on elevating Foster Brooks into a newly created position of Super Pope, which sounds kind of cool, but did not go down well with the freethinkers out there. Now, Art and Ollie wind up overseas, I forget which year, but it's long after they tried to hold up a Sears and Roebuck outlet store near Seattle. And we talked about their cadre when we were covering Infidel Fest out in Reno last November. Well, fair to say, if you see anyone in the British Isles sporting a copy of Mayfair or North Coventry Pike and Xander, just know they are funneling the proceeds back into Istanbul in an attempt to flip the country Unitarian. Mr. Tan Raincoat is just one of many of their cohorts. But surveillance withstanding, I was reading in the Times that temperatures in Paris, and I want to get the conversion here correctly, were 490 degrees Celsius, which I think with the conversion might be about 89 degrees. Sorry? Yep. Oh, Yuri, that seems low. What would 490 be? Yep, there's an adding machine on the. Okay. 914 degrees. Oh, that seems a little high. I do have to think some of the kitchens down there in the La Cornea district get pretty hot. And not to lose the noodle, but I would say the Frenchies need to get a little cash together down there and throw up some awnings. I mean, it makes you wonder what they're spending their money on. I mean, God forbid they spring for an air conditioner on the continent. Strange weather, either way you cut it. I understand that Professor Gilmoyle has no shortage of theories on this heat wave, but all roads, in my opinion, tie into the Fae folk. It's popular to follow the whole Peter Pan, Midsummer Night's narrative, but bear with me here. Mainstream opinion will tell you that the garden variety fairies we see back in the States and the Fae over here are one and the same. Let me assure you, brother, they are not. In one corner is a limp link of Oscar Mayer, and the other is a Louisville slugger. And no offense to the Cherokee, who have their own Fae attachments, or the Scottish Germanic enclaves that may have hopped over the drink from here, but it's no competition. They hang out in packs around these parts with kelpies and elves and homeless brownies. It's pretty intimidating stuff. Try to get a free seat on a bus and you'll see pretty quick a whole gaggle of otherworlders with a hold on this island like Wrigley's on a deer antler. No, you and I, or humanity at large, don't have a prayer of affecting the weather, but these Fae folk are clearly trying to flip the lawn chair and expand their dominion outside the other world. Now, this heat wave might just be the grand stratagem to push people off their properties, turn the soil arid, at least temporarily, and let the Fae expand their underground layers. You ever wonder why Irish soil is so fertile? I'll give you two words: Fae compost, my friends. Well, it's right there in their poems, too. Come, gather near the smoldering fire. The embers of flame will console and inspire. Now, my only aim is to spread some awareness, of course. It's one thing to be taken off guard. But another, and this has happened too many freaking times, another thing altogether to have your britches pulled down when you thought you were going to shoot a half-court shot. And let me tell you, folks, these Fae are not just litigious. They're ingenious. Dig deep and you'll unearth their fingerprints all over that Rancho de Pescado development near Dublin. And how about a little thing called ephemeral tenancy? Sure, let's have a chuckle about it. Then let's absolutely tear our hair out over it. Only in the fantastical legal lexicon of the Fae could mushroom circles in your backyard be the quill that inks a lease with the earth spirits. Well, speaking of such, we've had Melvin, we've had Tico, countless earth spirits on this program. Were they being agents of renewal, counterbalancing mankind's footprint in the world? No. They are as engrossed as a partially tranquilized land surveyor in the high-stakes drama of whether Andy Gibb will stay or go from Solid Gold, whatever the heck that is. One wonders if they even realize that they're being colonized by Fae embassies sprouting up like shiitake after spring rain. Ports of entry, people. Ports of intrigue. And this transports me to my airborne rendezvous with a super friendly latex salesman, a gentleman from Vermont named Neutro, or was it Nugget? Details, really, footnotes in the main spectacle. You see, this man's prodigal son was recently exonerated in a rather unpleasant legal affair. The celebratory gift, none other than the fabled Commodore 64 personal computer, an artifact not just of silicon, but of sorcery, as we've laid bare many times on this program. And we've had testimonials about Price Binger's soul purifier working wonders on the Apple II. But what of the Commodore? Well, allow me to unspool a thread of intrigue. I learned a lot sitting in that plane seat. The Montpelier merchant who peddled this digital chimera had apparently been besieged by users, their screens turning an eerie shade of emerald at the stroke of midnight. But it doesn't end there. For 10 minutes, culinary alchemy unfolds. Butter, so lovingly interwoven into cakes, pies, and confections, performs an exodus in thin air, transmogrifying back into what I call prosaic 1.5 by 1.5 by 3.5 inch blocks, just like the stuff at the supermarket. Shelf ready. As if it wasn't sufficiently uncanny, nearby marmots, if you're familiar, be they pets or passerby, suffer a rather ignominious bout of gastrointestinal turmoil, subject I am not unfamiliar with. Sympathize with the good marmot. Why, you ask? Well, I researched this, reading a back issue of Tool and Plow in the toilet of the 707 as we were passing over Greenland. And the answer may lie in a quaint Austrian dance known as the Schuhplattler, I believe. This dance, folks, is deceivingly simple. Hand claps and foot stomps. However, when these are executed properly, they radiate outward into the atmosphere on a wavelength that only a powered-on, can you guess, Commodore 64 anywhere globally can pick up. And this clearly creates a quantum doorway, making all of these supernatural phenomenon a fait accompli. Remember, for those listening, the Schuhplattler isn't merely Austrian folklore. It is a digital conjuring incantation, waiting for the clock to strike 12. So the next time your Commodore 64 takes on a iridescent glow, perhaps considering locking up your butter and your marmots. And when we return, birthdays, more from the Republic of Ireland coming up next. How often do you stop to consider the many things in your life that leak? Faucets, car engines, even the United States government has its moments. Leakages, my friends, are the unsung saboteurs lurking in the shadowy crannies of our daily existence. Sun-tortured garden hoses, cracking, even disintegrating over time, until that Sunday arrives when they become treacherous assassins, murdering the delicate veneer of your stylish corduroy, delaying your rendezvous with a bewitching woman named Fussy, resulting in the end of your genetic line. Well, that's why in my endless quest for solutions to life's magma flow of conundrums, I found Leak Enigma 11. Now, the 11 isn't just a head-scratching cipher. It signifies the jaw-dropping price of just 11 cents. I heard that right. Imagine my wonder, even stupefaction, when I tested this sorcerous serum on a pair of galoshes whose cracked left sole first betrayed me during the winter of '78. I simply applied a dab, a mere skosh, of Leak Enigma 11, and the results were so rapid and astonishing that I felt like I'd given birth to a standard-size infant. Those galoshes were as watertight as a Finnish accountant after the quick once over. Lazarus rising from the dead in shoe form, my friends. This easy-to-use elixir can seal, mend, and resurrect any leaky object, be it your grandmother's vintage teapot or even your sainted grandmother herself, long suffering with incontinence since Jerry Ford was in office. It was no lie. For the paltry sum of 11 cents, that's right, a mere 11th of a dollar, you too can become the maestro of mending, the savant of sealing, the paragon of patching. Combine it with bacon bits and mayonnaise, and I'm telling you, you haven't tasted better salad dressing. But act fast, because supplies are running low, folks. I can only assume there's a basement somewhere in Sheboygan with at least 1,000 cans of Leak Enigma 11 already hoarded away. Nancy, we love you, but you probably should lay off. Don't let leaks subvert your domestic tranquility. Send check or money order for 11 cents to Leak Enigma Parish, Prancing Thunder, Wisconsin 53558. Include $10.75 for shipping and handling. Get your Leak Enigma 11 today and make sure the only thing leaking in your life is the single tear on your cheek as you revel in your newfound leakless peace of mind. Still not used to the light up here. The skies are beyond haunting. They look poised for something dark, I'm sorry to say. Marjorie Jacobian, in her memoir, God's Light Bulb, specifically her chapter on cursed peoples, identified a massive prism floating over this place, about 600 square kilometers in size, positioned over this whole archipelago up here. And my closet back home is better lit than this joint. And let me tell you, it does bring the hallucinations. You can come out around dusk, and don't be surprised if you see what I can only describe as multiple Cloris Leachmans in various poses, stretched across the horizon like a bizarre group of constellations, frightening to see in person at scale. And despite what Yuri thinks, it cannot be chalked up to a C-grade plate of bangers and mash. Speaking of alarming, maybe dangerous is the better word, our first birthday tonight, a woman I can only call a matron of militarized munchies, Juliette Gordon Lowe, born in 1860 on this date. A common name, no. One you should know if you're concerned, as I am, with legalized standing armies. Ms. Lowe is responsible for none other than one of the largest peacetime reserves in the world, although I can't be sure of the exact numbers. Well, that would be the supposedly benevolent Girl Scouts of America. And an organization, in my opinion, insidious for the baiting techniques they use. And the female youth of this land in paramilitary forms, dispensing what I can only call a dental nightmare. And macaroons have their place, but not when actively used to seduce the populace into a dull and drooling mass. I can only say I'm thankful that this Dragon Queen died in 1927. Well, then again, did she? Food for thought. I'll move on quickly from there. Our second birthday spotlight is on the other end of the orthodontic spectrum. And this guy has a smile that can impregnate at 50 yards. And add to that, by all accounts, he's as Virtuous, as the character he plays on Little House on the Prairie, although I tend to stay away from the intense stuff where television is concerned. Naturally, I know him from the aforementioned Bonanza, which we touched on a little while ago. That's Michael Landon. He's turning 46 today. And I have to posit here some doubt as to whether he's quite the John the Baptist in blue jeans we've all been led to believe. I mean, I happened across an article in Currents in Alternative Podiatry claiming that Mr. Landon was up to his buttonflies in a parking spot fixing scheme. This operation of his purportedly targeted senior citizens and the socioeconomically disadvantaged. His little house, it seems, was more of a little hub for clearing waivers that could be purchased to a network of bellboys and doormen across the Golden State. When it comes time for that dinner at the Humble Hebrew in Malibu, for instance, where the spaghetti noodles are exactly 11.6 inches long, or a trip to the New Habsburg Imperial Theater to see John Dean's one-man show, Hush Daddy. Good show, by the way. Your more geriatric patrons would find their reserved parking spots mysteriously occupied. As you know, I have an often erotic love for the free market, but Landon and this shadowy posse of his quickly created what I can only call a fabricated scarcity that would make OPEC blush. Oh, why haven't we heard about this on the CBS Evening News? According to the same article, Mr. Ingalls was definitely caught with his fingers in the crock. But given his king-making prowess, a deal was struck in which he would do a weekly penance of sorts on an angel-themed TV show to be named. No idea what that's about. And here's the capper. Sonny Bono would be installed as mayor of Palm Springs, California. This is a guy dressed like a full-body moccasin, so I'm not too confident on the last bit there. I think it's bound to fall apart. Anyway, we'll never truly know, but I find it curious. Pretty darn curious. Dale Evans, wife of Roy Rogers, is 70. I've been researching these two since the late 60s. And you want to talk about a dry milk carton pressed beneath a teacher's derriere. Try finding any information on the Flying L Ranch down in Davis, Oklahoma, where Evans and Rogers were married back in the mid-40s, I think it was. And I'm not talking about the party line about a working cattle ranch. I'm talking about the pursuit of the real truth here. Now, for one, we still don't know what became of the Reverend Vidal Fleming, who was the first poor soul to look into this mess during the 1950s. Now, the mainstream press carried the water that he drove a Chevy off the end of McLean Dyke. Between you and I think he got bad day at Black Rocked. Now, the question remains, what kind of propellant, and apparatus for that matter, will allow you to get a structure, a ranch house, that is in no way airworthy, aloft? I mean, to that point, the only picture I've seen from the marriage ceremony, no surprise, is indoor. God forbid they get a view through the window and reveal that they're cruising around 10,000 feet above the Oklahoma plains. As is the case with most of these things, humankind is not nearly ready. See Charlene Tilton. All right. Well, let's see what friends of the show we have celebrating birthdays. Best wishes here to longtime listener and frequent caller on Carnivore Night, florist Deidre Hurd. She is 41. If you don't know Deidre, she is proud owner of Thorny Issues, a florist shop down in Bold Refusal, Illinois, specializing in a rare carnivorous flora. A rumor has it she discovered a temporal rift in her greenhouse and now sources her Venus flytraps directly from the planet Triffidia. If you're ever passing through Bold Refusal, she holds moonlight seances to consult the spirits of dead botanists for a lot of her horticultural insights. And we used one of those formulas last Thanksgiving to sedate Marisol's cousin, Dylan. So, happy birthday, Deidre. Next, our friend and all-around expert mechanic, Ian Pell, is 59. Ian, as you may know, advertises on the show for Cogs and Bog. It's a auto shop near Portland, Nebraska, if you don't know. And they are only open, speaking of the moon, during eclipses and other celestial events. They only repair cars manufactured during Mercury retrograde, so it's a pretty niche market. If you ever had a vehicle repaired by Ian, and we verified this, you will notice that they appear to drive to random points in time, future or past. These apparently coincide with uncomfortable conversations, be it with family or strangers. If you want to read a great show transcript, actually, Ian called in to share mechanical tips when we had Juice Newton on the show. Most people, I think, remember the big argument from that show, but personally, I didn't know you could use a rear shock from a 77 Skylark as a dowsing rod to find ley lines. So, for that alone, enjoy your special day, Ian. Lastly, Vicademos Manikafopoulos, known to his friends as Mitchie. Vicademos is credited with reintroducing fire-belly salamanders into urban sewers to balance out the alligator population in Iowa City. It's a big job. It did turn out they didn't have an alligator population, so that's turned into a little bit of a headache. Mitchie, though, is also in charge of arranging the city's trees in geometric patterns only decipherable from an altitude of 8,000 feet, I think, where the Hectorian surveillance probe snaps its Polaroids. As we've discussed on the show many times, arrangements are in place with the Hectorians to manage terrestrial arboreal health in greater Iowa City. No idea how much you're getting paid for that. They're in their 7th year of drought there, so presumably they're still tweaking it. But happy 38th birthday, Mitchie. Folks, we do have some interesting correspondence for you. When we return, we'll see you back after this message.
You're listening to the voice of Enoch Price. There's a new book coming to newsstands as we close the extraordinary year 1982. If you're frightened of being terrified or perhaps losing your mind altogether, I beg you to change to another radio station for the next few minutes. Let me be perspicuous. This text has already driven 2 typesetters to madness and caused an unfortunate incident involving a bookbinder and a cheese-making leper colony. For this literary foray, I have reached deeper into my own darkness than I dreamt imaginable. In my lonely study, lit exclusively by malfunctioning incandescent lights, I embarked on a phantasmagorical voyage, so profound that even Dante would have cautioned against. My mind meandered through the antechambers of Hades, soared through the ectoplasmic realms of the netherworld, and dallied in the twilight bazaars of the Jinn. There I dined briefly on a sort of strawberry puff pastry. I remain haunted by its innocent and timely succor. Nonetheless, when I returned, a tome of some 413 pages laid in my hands. The title of this infernal incunabulum is The Widow of Abaddon's Trousers. Of course, out of conscience, I must tell you something about the poor man at the center of this story. He is a waif when compared to the average human male, and his name carries the burden of his parentage. He is called Chippy, and what Chippy lacks in strength and intelligence, he makes up for in sheer volume of misfortune. It is his unskilled hands that, upon discovering an ancient timepiece, unravel the fabric of his own soul. Through his ruthlessly misguided decision-making, you will find yourself questioning the ontological contours of humanity itself. So, if you believe yourself to be a robust constitution, mentally and spiritually, then prepare to enter a world that defies the paltry laws of both God and man. Do you possess the courage to meet the widow of Abaddon's trousers? Well, that remains to be seen. But the ticket will cost you a mere $10.99 for a hardback that you will either entomb with your own remains or bequeath to your offspring, regardless of their worthiness. The widow of Abaddon's trousers, to be found soon in a sinister corner of your local bookshop, next to the crucifix and salt circles. I thank you humbly.
I've been enjoying some bangers and mash, as they call them here, at the Tarnished Scepter, which go by the name The Vicar's Elegy on the menu. And I have noticed something astonishing. I've had at least 3 good cracks at this plate of Vicar's Elegy between segments here. And I'll say it here, folks. I have, in fact, finished this plate at least twice. And yet when I come back from the little matador's room, having done my business, the contents of the plate have reconstituted themselves. Honestly, based on the verbal assault we've been throwing at the Fey folk, I expected to be poisoned before being gifted with limitless lunch. Not sure how this is going to turn out, but I'll just come right out with it. I am not above meeting with our adversaries. If the Fey folk are listening now, and I don't think I have to wonder about that much, and I say give us a call on the Higher Plane hotline, 1-607-834-0981. International charges apply, and I understand they are very hefty. If you call after 11 p.m. here, local time, you can dial 1-800-590-003, and you'll land a slightly better rate, provided you can keep the conversation to 3 minutes or less. If you get disconnected for any reason, just dial 1-517-404-3571. Wait for the overseas operator, who will patch you back over to the 0981 number. It's 4 times the normal rate unless you disconnect and reconnect again, and then you save either 31 or 14% depending on the operator. And no reason for us not to sit down and get some questions answered, especially with everyone listening. Quick note here for Mindy, who is daughter to Dolores and Matthew. Yuri passed me a note that you called. I just want to let you know that everything is fine here. Dolores and Matthew hitched a ride with an ambulance about 40 minutes back, after Dolores also started sporting a little froth. And when you believe it, they are already back. Turns out it was a turnip delivery service on the hunt for some quick day labor. Here's the deal, Mindy. I wasn't expecting miracles from your parents. Their slow pace, especially with heavier equipment, has been a setback. Added to that, I lost a button down that we used to make a tourniquet. But I'm sending a list of likely financial damages for the show back with them once we wrap. So you can all have a look at those when time allows. I'm happy to accept payments over time, assuming the amount per payment doesn't fall beneath around 500 American dollars, of course. So appreciate the call. All right, let's jump into listener letters. First up, we have Blanche Sosa from Forgotten Field, Minnesota, who writes us, Dear Colonel Prather, I reach out to you as an act of desperation. I am a 63-year-old widower, and for most of the 30 years I've lived in my modest home, Mr. Philomonger has been my neighbor. Our relations were polite, bordering on dull for many years, until he supposedly passed away last winter. I am purposeful in raising that doubt, Colonel, as I have noticed a great many suspicious happenings since his official departure. While my next-door dwelling now stands vacant to the naked eye, I hear disquieting sounds of hammering to the beat of the old Jimmy Tindr's jazz record, Ain't No Love Bigger Than the World's Love Except My Love, played in reverse. Added to this, and in the dead of winter, the inexplicable wafting smell of sunflowers mixed with the scent of slightly irritated middle-aged landscape. This has crossed the line in me from curiosity to concern. As if that weren't enough, the purification ponds at the Lewis and Jeffrey Sluice Jetter water treatment plant, where I was baptized, usually pristine and practically crystalline, have turned an unsettling shade of lavender and emit an ethereal glow which shoots through the reeds and regularly illuminates Philomonger's abandoned 1969 Chevy Capybara wagon. Colonel Prather, I have taken to wearing a pillowcase over my head and other implements at all hours to avoid this taunting menagerie. I don't know you well, but if you cannot assist me, I will make your life a living hell. Love, Blanche. Well, thank you, Blanche. I'm pleased to say that as soon as we knew we would be reading your letter on the air, we sprung into action. When I was a kid, I used to chat with a vagrant who hung out at the end of our yard. And I remember on one occasion that he was sewing himself up after a quick liver procedure. And he told me that sometimes the best answers are the simplest answers. You don't get advice like that and not have it stick to you. And in this case, I think it's right there in the name of the little town you call home. Now, according to the research that Yuri cooked up for us, there are around 280 persons in Forgotten Field, give or take a toddler. And nearly as many as that disappeared with the Top Soul tour group in Knob Lawson's beet field up in Pressing, Oregon in winter '68, I think it was. And we're not even factoring in the deliberate use of hallucinogens. Blanche, in short, not only do we have an answer, we've already got things rolling on the ground. Now, we enlisted the assistance of an advertiser on the show who specializes in real estate acquisitions. We won't mention them by name, but they're one of the many folks that deal in temporary foam structures. Now, you probably noticed by the time we're reading this that a number of mobile homes have started surrounding Forgotten Field, and the presence will become pretty obvious of some folks roaming the streets dressed in full-body protective clothing, wearing patches reading the Happiness Foundation. Now, these folks will speak in Italian, but don't be alarmed. They are there to guide you to one of the 3 processing queues on the town outskirts. Now, it's suggested you take any critical documents, a small suitcase, and coat, if time permits, on your journey. You'll spend between 6 to 8 months in the tent city. They're standing up near Whispering Falls, which is only about a day on foot from your location, I'm happy to say. Afterwards, Blanche, you're going to be welcomed back to a completely remade Forgotten Field. The long hike back will be worth it, trust me, as you will be returning to the renamed Remembrance Gardens, a sprawling luxury resort where you will have your own 180 square foot apartment with working toilet. There you'll join a new family of sorts among maintenance services, where your work will be essential to the experience of every wealthy visitor. Let us know how you're doing, and best of luck. Thanks for the letter. All right. We have had a lot of folks asking the whereabouts of the self-proclaimed civilian scientist, Aaron Huff. So I'm pleased as an undulating body of water to hold in my hand a letter from Aaron, postmarked Tucson, Arizona. So let's get into this. He begins, "Good day to you, Colonel, and let me offer my apologies for the lengthy delay. I have been doing a lot of tunneling lately and recently started work at Walt's Chicken World, where I am second shift. After much consideration, I am pausing work on the Forrest Tucker International Tunnel Network until I develop a means of vaporizing silica without heat. Listeners to your show would have heard me speak before at length about the vengeance I seek towards the spiny-headed Porfundians, whose arrogance and prancing is more a motivation to me than the ruthless but little-known pillaging of my childhood home, Taffeta Springs. Full confession, it is with some regret that my near-constant taunting of the Porfundians has them planning a fairly large invasion of our beloved planet Earth. With this in mind, I feel like I owe it to my fellow citizens to develop various means of defending our cosmic shores, as it were. The first of these projects is meant to avoid conflict altogether, or at least render it very difficult on our spine-faced attackers. Please find the schematic draft of the Mirror of Celestial Confusion Array, or MCCA, attached. This device will project misleading images into orbit or onto the lunar surface to steer away even the most persistent alien interlopers. Let me see here. He's got about a page and a half on polish. Here we go. I am currently eyeing potential sites in New Mexico, specifically the picturesque stretches south of Tucumcari. This area should snugly accommodate the 12.5-mile radius of the Centerpoint unit, codenamed Liza Minnelli. I wonder if you meant Liza Minnelli. Please do not read the code name on air. Collectively, the entire 5-pedestal sunflower array configuration signal stitches to a maximum projecting circumference of 157.08 miles. Power and equipment requirements are as follows. All right, here's the good stuff. 5 miniaturized fission reactors to sit at the base of each pedestal. All right. Each of these will be named after my first 5 girlfriends. Angie, if you're listening, no, you did not make the list. Let's see here. For command and control, we'll need 60 IBM System 370 mainframes linked for parallel processing, approximately 11,000 8-inch floppy disks in a climate-controlled vault outfitted with fluorescents and Boston ferns for atmosphere. Colonel, for personal reasons, I plan to self-fund most of this, but would appreciate a small bridge loan of $75 to cater a Southwestern-style buffet for some additional investors. All the best, Aaron. You certainly won't find any fans of the Porfundians in this restaurant. I think this MCCA sounds absolutely fantastic. Unlike many ideas we discussed on the program, this really has a chance of happening. As for the $75, I do think that could also happen. But I would actually need to borrow $20 from you, Aaron, for around 4 weeks. And once I return that to you, I would loan you the first $5 of the $75, but would then need to borrow $12 for another week and a half, roughly. And we would just continue this pattern, subtracting or adding $3 each time around until we both end up with $118 or thereabouts, at which time you could offload $43 in my direction, and we're all square. I'm not sure what kind of timetable you're operating on, but hit us up on the Higher Plane hotline if you like the sound of that. Always good to hear from you, Aaron. All right, last one here, and I have to say this has got me pretty concerned. Just jump in here. Dear Beyond the Near Horizon, my name is the Honorable Claudia Navarro, and I'm the 33rd mayor of Steer Pilot, Texas. If you follow lacrosse, you'll know that our Steer Pilot Senators advanced in 1971 to the divisional round of the state championship before we were eliminated by the West Houston Regulators, although that outcome is disputed. They've carried your program on KEKI-AM, The Hound, since Maria Rubio saw our savior in a tortilla back in October 77. I'm writing on behalf of our municipality in relation to your broadcast. During the meeting of our 4-person town council in April of this year, resident Walker Partners, who manages abandoned alpaca enclosures, alerted us to the fact that during the 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. time slot, when your program is usually rebroadcast from the affiliate in Melting Pine, an alternate program has been airing featuring a host named Cody Harris Parker, who claims to be a recently broke oil baron pushing a line of skincare products called Wealthy Widow. He calls the program Cody Harris Parker Investigates, and they focus on a different stain removal problem each episode. She gets into it. This sounds like it might become tedious. It does. We did not, as a community, have a great love for your program, but your subject matter is at least varied. Last Monday night, an emergency session was held after a week of the following broadcast topics. Let's see what she's got here. August 1st, removing peach jam from a cream-colored cable knit cardigan using soy sauce. August 2nd, removing day-old tomato soup from a mauve Afghan using motor oil. August 3rd, removing red latex paint from a silk banner using only fire. As she continues, you get the idea. I'm sure this has become a living hell, as you can see. Naturally, you might be asking why we don't simply switch off the radio. If you're familiar with Ulto the Ice Wizard, we have credible intelligence that suggests he will make landfall in or near city limits any day now. His trademark whistling sound is slightly amplified over AM radio waves, as you may know, and so every house and business in town has the radio playing night and day for this reason. We have no love for your content, but thought you and this Cody Harris Parker character might make nice, natural enemies. Better yet, there is an outside chance that you might both perish, and we can get Paul Harvey back on the air. With all legally binding implications and emotional desperation, Mayor Navarro. Well, let me first say that it's an honor to address a fellow patriot with such specific grievances. I don't really follow art in general, but I don't think it's too much a coincidence that the minimalist Donald Judd relocated to Marfa the same year your lads fell in pretty mysterious fashion to West Houston. And I previously linked this to a sore thigh I experienced during that time, but I think there's enough mayonnaise to spread around here. Now, to get back on the ball, I am concerned. Cody Harris Parker is messing around with some very dangerous and powerful elements. Apparel stains are often the means by which those who have taken the holy escalator signal to the living. Now, there's no doubt in my mind Mr. Parker has likely snuffed out the final vital communications of countless grandmothers and fighter pilots, feeding the meat grinder for his broadcasts. To paraphrase Freud, a spaghetti sauce stain is never just a spaghetti sauce stain. Just ask Golda Meir. As for your listening dilemma, I'm very sensitive to Ulto's situation personally. He could land on any sofa in that little burg of yours, hypothetically speaking. This guy is trapped in an unhappy marriage, and the whole dalliance with the White Witch, I think that's just about the sex. I don't like to dabble in people's personal affairs, but you've got to, first of all, go back and end things properly with Helen. You got 2 condos in Vale. The only child you had is touring with Kiss. I think the peace treaty writes itself. But I don't know if you end up with Jardis. She's a looker. But aside from the fact that you've got no Jinn or giant in you, you both deal in meteorological manipulation. Well, that's a right down the middle career conflict. And you're going to end up super bitter, I think. Well, let's be honest, hooking up with someone who just got out of the clink after a 900-year banishment is asking for grass stains on the khakis. Ulto needs to only focus on descending to the Terran plane safely right now, period. Which means he's headed in your direction. And with that in mind, as much as I would love to retain your listenership there in, what was it, Yuri? Smear Violet? Priorities are priorities. So we've purchased a bus ticket for a friend of the show, Donovan Vagabond Brock. You might know that name. I'll tell you right now, you're going to love this guy. He is one heck of a storyteller. And we're sending him down with an LPAM, low-power AM transmitter, dipole antenna, rotary knob mixer, probably a couple of Shure SM58s. And we're just going to have him transmit right over the top of that sucker. And he'll certainly cover the 3 square miles that make up your little burg. And he's an avid asphalt collector. And given that background, his show will focus on road resurfacing, at least for the first couple of years. Now, if you folks can spot him food, water, and a place to stay, I think he can do the rest. He does have a small butane hash oil habit, so you might get a little unexpected foot traffic into town, but I think it's a pretty balanced deal. And we do thank you for writing, and all the best. Folks, when we return, we'll discuss the new book, Apocolypse 1983, with Professor Tasha Gilmoyle. Stick around. Are you the president of a large, wealthy company? If you are, you've noticed increasingly how strong, successful men have started to become the bad guy in just about every movie and TV show spilling out of Hollywood. It's enough to wreck a person emotionally, and although I'm not the president of anything specific, I feel such a pain of sorrow when
that stuff into the woods, Cindy. God's honest truth, straight from the bigger one. Good people, let's talk about the situation we have with mile marker 52. That's out on Fender Highway. I want you to listen good here. We're not talking garden variety rutting here. We've got at least an AASHTO grade foobar. This is straight out of Dostoevsky, man. Longitudinal joint failure stretching over a full 0.2 of a mile. People. This is not your grandma's transverse crack. This is a day-old milkshake on a canvas of asphalt. It's an affront to every decent road layer from here to Milwaukee. Now for the plebes among us, let me elucidate. Longitudinal joints are like the spinal cords of our roads. Treat them wrong and you are in for a lifetime of regret, an uncountable sum of alignment adjustments. So when you're talking about a failure, I'm not referring to missing a free throw in gym class. It's about compromising the skeletal integrity of the arterial lifeblood of this fine nation. God bless America. I've got schematics here showing a geogrid layer just begging for deployment. And don't, please, for the love of God, don't get me started on the Idaho slab technique. We're not making potato pancakes. We're saving this road from subgrade deformation, possibly from itself. Now, if you are invested in binary to aggregate ratios, as I am, I want you to stay tuned. I really do. We've got an interview coming up with Dr. Sheila Stone, a woman who single-handedly revolutionized warm mix asphalt. She's the Beethoven of bitumen, folks, and you will not want to miss that. Now, I got a message here from the Steer Pilot Mercantile Commission I'm going to lay down for you. For immediate release, this is a correction to the message of October 18th. We were premature potato pancakes. We're saving it.
Ask anyone who wears undergarments of any kind, and they will tell you the same thing. Do yourself a favor, and if you've got one, have your personal secretary or underling of your choice give the folks at Corporate President Preservation Support Fund a call at 1-800-780-7456. Operators are standing by to offer the type of comfort and understanding you deserve from a relative stranger who will answer to the name of your choice, and it will only cost you 99 cents a minute. Don't believe the hype from Hollywood. Start feeling like a captain of industry again, one soothing conversation at a time. That's the Corporate President Preservation Support Fund. It really is going to be all right. All right, folks. With us now on the long-distance trunk line from Kilkenny, author and professor of aluminum variants at the Kilkenny Institute of Involuntary Energy, Professor Tasha Gilmoyle. Good evening, Professor, or do you prefer Doctor?
Professor's fine. I can tell already you got soft hands. City boy hands.
Or the phone, really. Well, I didn't read anything about remote viewing in your notes. Let me take another look here.
Your voice, genius. It's all whiny.
Well, you'll find this interesting. The spectral audiologist, Lance Candidancer, we had on in year 2, described my voice as sounding like a wounded land mammal, although he didn't specify which one. So I wonder if that's got something to do with it. The bottom of some paws can be pretty tender, so you might be onto something. Oh, let's lay the banana skins down, though. You are, straight up, one of the most controversial figures in Europe. And I'd be dishonest if I claimed I didn't want to talk about your most recent arrest for motorizing field mice in Denmark. Naturally, our main reason for having you on is what I think is a fascinating new work, Apocolypse 1983.
Controversial is a crumb of a word. Yet inspired toss it around when they're too witless to engage with the material in it. As for the
mice escapade. I'd argue it's more of a crime to let those rodents squander their potential by not motorizing them.
Sure. Well, I thought we might start, actually, with your background. Not many know of your origins, and you don't include biographical materials in any of your book sleeves. I assume you're from Ireland originally?
Your back of the book biographies are the sanctuary of the narcissist. I am of Hibernia. But my intellectual pursuits were self-crafted. All of them here. They know me. Know how I make my living.
If you don't mind me pressing a little here, were you born in Kilkenny proper? I mean, there are rumors, mostly circulated by one of your chief critics, Antoine Lamouff. But not only were you born there, but at the age of 6, you actually sent your mother and father to work at a rubber sealant factory, and that this was solely in the interest of supporting what was a pretty ugly taffy habit at the time. I mean, how much of that is based in truth?
Antoine Lamouff. A peddler of mendacities and weaver of trite conspiracies. A man wouldn't know truth if it slapped his bare ass. I wasn't born in Kilkenny. I merely find myself tethered to this intellectual wasteland for the time being. I got no great love for my parents, but I don't need no help. Don't want no volunteers, don't want no mates. So then, got any questions that aren't from the tabloids?
Fair enough. Now, I first heard your name back in 1979 reading Yucca Plant, Secret Invaders. Now, I think it's right up there with the Immortals, maybe better than Satan's Milk by Bridget Coma. Before we get to the new book, I always wanted to ask, what do you have against the Yucca? I mean, don't get me wrong, they crossed the line when they invaded Elko, Nevada, but you seem to start that book with a fire in your belly.
Most of you are like, possess no clue of the real Yucca. This plant will swallow you whole. I seen one take down a Baptist minister in Green Gables. A little shaken, a little tenderizing, and down he went. I ain't cracked open a Bible since then. As for Satan's Milk, that'd be the literary equivalent of elevator music.
So, I take it you didn't enjoy the film version. I thought that was a pretty compelling turn from Rod Taylor.
Film version? Jesus. Get your rock on straight. Rod Taylor couldn't act his way out of a paper bag if you spotted him a hose and a pair of spiked heels. 20 quid says the whole enterprise was nothing but a shallow money grab. Is that cleared up for you?
Well, I admit to being biased, but man, I love the Rod Taylor heel inserts. If you don't use those, I absolutely recommend them. On the scientific front, I understand that congratulations are in order. You recently published a paper up at the Institute outlining a method of increasing cooking time through temperature reduction.
Aye.
What type of applications for this breakthrough jump out at you?
This ain't no monkey cage we got here. My research is about understanding the ramifications of energy alteration on a molecular level. The real action is in the material sciences, cryogenics, even nuclear dynamics. I wouldn't expect someone who thinks Satan's Milk was compelling to understand. So listen close. In the future, when you eat your precious chili dog, you'll be unleashing a power source that will course through your body. You'll need to be cautious when you go to the toilet.
Sure.
With your flatulence. Your flatulence will give you the power of flight itself.
Speaking of predictions, you paint a pretty grim picture of the future in Apocolypse 1983. Fires, floods, earthquakes, you name it. Muncie, Indiana really seems to take it in the shorts. Why do so many of the catastrophes in the book start from Little Chicago?
You go tell the coroner and the taxidermy man that it's not so much about the geography as it is about the human arrogance that tends to pool in such places. They're all sinkholes of delusional self-importance.
What in Hades happened in Muncie, Indiana?
Exactly. Naturally, when the universe decides to correct itself, these places become the epicenters of calamity.
Well, I had a world-class squash pasta there last November at the Close Encounters reenactment, so I'm not sure if they had it coming, per se. I do need to hoof it up there earlier next year so that I don't get stuck playing Melinda Dillon again. Good actress, but her wardrobe looks pretty awful on my frame. Folks, we'll take a short break, then we'll get to some of your calls with Professor Tasha Gilmoyle. Do come back. My feet, like those of my late father and actress Audrey Hepburn, are something of a desert. Large, long, filled with mystery and danger, and brother, are they dry. For years I carried a pumice stone in the shape of General Douglas MacArthur along with a matching foot file. That did the trick until I reached the age of 17, when I transitioned to a raspberry heel balm made by old Mrs. Hercombe at the VFW. When she was arrested for cannibalism, I began making my own Vaseline in my converted Capri Cab-Over camper. If you listen to this show, you know how that ended, of course, and each August the 4th we read the names of the good people who perished in that inferno. That was why I was at first tearful, and then thrilled to find a fantastic new solution. Introducing the three-eyed pyramid foot treatment from Total Chemist, another exciting offering from the makers of Acid Clean disinfecting rust repellent. Folks, it's as easy to use as it is to pronounce. Step 1. Apply 3 squirts from your 16-ounce bottle of pyramid ointment onto your bare foot. After the temporary stinging pain subsides, recite the easy-to-learn verse, Webawet, opener of ways, granter of choices, unfolder of options, I praise and honor you. Step 2. Slide into your comfortable Nile knitwear socks, made from pure Egyptian cotton, and blessed by a dedicated team of actors in the Detroit area, dressed in authentic pharaonic wardrobe reproductions. Finally, invoke one final incantation 3 times to release the spirit of Pedanon, to incite your own phalangeal rejuvenation. For reasons of public safety, we won't recite it over the air, but let me tell you, after only 190 treatments, you'll begin to feel the sarcophagi on each of your feet lifting away. Side effects include mild bouts of molting and a tendency to create paralysis in others when you touch them. I think it's a fantastic way to maintain personal space, and the look of fear in other people's eyes is pretty addictive. Do yourself a favor and sign up for just 3 easy payments of $19.99. You're going to send that first check or money order to Total Chemist, Townsend Daycare Facility, 16 Newman Street, Thunderclap, New Mexico, 81001. Take your first steps in years towards moistness. Peer into the three-eyed pyramid today. Folks, we're back with Irish author and professor of aluminum variants, Tasha Gilmoyle. If you'd like to talk to our guest, hit us up on the Higher Plane hotline, 1-800-777-1010 or 1-800-GET-HIGHER. Again, that number is 1-800-536-4956. Get those questions ready, folks. Professor, you depict 4 stages, or steps, towards next year's apocalypse in your book. Can you lay those out for us?
Look at the boy that finally graduated from interviewing school. I laid it out nice and clear, yeah. First we have ignition, a literal and metaphorical spark that initiates the catastrophic chain of events. This will primarily take the form of a film featuring Jason Robards and John Lithgow.
Who in Hades is John Lithgow?
I'd be one of a party of 4 extraterrestrials that come to live on Earth. But let me tell you, they're not here about pleasure boating or day sailing. Now second comes the proliferation, where all hell breaks loose in a kaleidoscopic flurry of disasters, each worse than the last.
Fires and floods.
That's for ninnies. I'm talking about a cult run by the most dangerous creatures on this planet.
Chimera? Chupacabra?
School children, dabbling in dark alchemy out in the fields, among the corn and the cauliflower, designing by their own wee, wicked hands a walk-in whore, an armada of mind-controlling, toddler-sized demons.
Like the Ballards.
They're nothing like the Ballard, you mindless twit. These ready armies make their way into millions of homes as a plaything for the little masters. But there's something underneath it. Underneath that soft, pasty ugliness. These unholy toddlers do the bidding of chaotic forces. At nightfall, coordinating their movements with another of their abominations. An ungodly grafting of half rabbit, half insect.
Are we talking possible ties to the Fey folk in these parts?
It's got nothing whatever to do with the Fey folk, you genetic mistake. These are proper soldiers in the service of destruction. They have a direct hand in bringing about the third stage, desolation.
Wow.
They'll be grabbing on the minds of the weak and strong alike.
All right.
You will never see nothing like it. People clawing and scratching at each other in obedience to these little bastards.
Wouldn't we have a height advantage over these toddlers?
We're talking about millions of these things. Crawling the cities, farms, and suburbs alike.
Even places like Perth Amboy?
What in the holy hell is Perth Amboy? We're talking about societal collapse, mental unraveling, and the devaluation of anything we once held dear. Money, power, your precious institutions, ashes to ashes, my friend. The final stage, extinction, is precisely what it sounds like. The world as we know it ends not with a bang, but with an agonizing whimper.
You know, that brings up a good point. You mentioned that America and Muncie, Indiana are hit pretty hard by this coming apocalypse. But not only do other areas survive, some of them make out like a Latin lover. Everyone in Montevideo ends up with a free Volkswagen, just to name an example. The United States has defended the free world from the commies. What do we do to earn the ire of the gods?
I'll tell you what you did. You put Wink Martindale on the air. You put Chuck Woolery on the air. One country is responsible for all of that. Everybody has to do penance.
I'm not sure if we're going to come to precise accord on that topic. Let's take some calls, if we may. Therma from Jettison, Nebraska. You're on the air with Professor Gilmoyle.
Thank you, Colonel Prather, long-time listener. I don't think you addressed this in your book, Miss Gilmoyle, but I was wondering if you could tell me what stool softener you use.
I tell you what happened to a colleague of mine many years back when I taught Japanese math down near Waterford. He'd already been drinking mightily before we stumbled back to our campus apartment. This friend of mine, a fellow teacher, a French fella, Professor Herbe, crawled into the kitchen with me. I didn't notice how hungry he was until half an hour. He was like a tiger. You know what you do when you got someone that hungry, Therma? You find whatever you can to feed them. And what you got to realize is that we were hired on the down low between semesters. No one even knew we were teaching for a week. But there was an actor fella in there before us. He left a mess of bananas. There, his old Frenchman, he was real hungry. He kept pounding those things down, and I'd start hollering and screaming, warning him to stop. But he just kept at it. Before I looked, 11 bananas had gone down his throat. You know, the thing about someone with constipation, they're all bent over and they look up at you with those eyes. They don't even seem to be living. And all you can do is push them behind that water closet door. After you close it, then you hear that terrible high-pitched screaming. Anyway, next morning his sister and his brother-in-law came to pick that old Frenchman up. 11 bananas went down that gullet. One Frenchman carried out, and I taught both our classes the rest of the summer. July the 11th, 1952.
You know, I've got to go with Petterman's pellets on this one, Therma. They also ward off vampiric tree squirrels. So, 2 for 1 there. Carl from Clean Pipes, Maine, you're on the air.
Dr. Gilmoyle, you mentioned an armada.
You've stopped mid-sentence, Carl. Have you croaked, boy?
Well, I think you said Gila monsters, but the deal is I can pretty much run a brigade of those critters down in my Silverado. Sounds more like a nuisance than an apocalypse. In the main, I was wondering if you might consent to dating my brother-in-law, Frank. He's not too sharp, but I've got to get him the hell off my sofa, and I'm guessing a woman with your dispiriting disposition doesn't get many suitors. I'd spring for a case of Pabst Blue Ribbon and gas money, if you're game.
Carl, let's not conflate my disdain for amenity with a lack of romantic prospects. As for your brother-in-law, well, if he's the sort of man who finds Gila monsters a mere nuisance, then I doubt he'd be mentally equipped to comprehend the complexities of my worldview, let alone share a pint with me. Consider my disposition not merely dispiriting, but rather a Darwinian filter, separating the intellectual wheat from the chaff. Next color.
Carl, I'll patch you over to Yuri. We'll take your information down on the live connection. We had Will Leveler on recently, who's been trying to crossbreed with the bipedal collies he's been raising up in Woodstock. I'm not sure on the conversational aspects, but sometimes it's just nice to have a warm body to curl up with at night. A Parathon, Waterlord of the Underlands, on the line from Kansas City. You're on the air.
I have consumed your book with much interest, Earthling. The panic you instill among the peoples of this pathetic globe will serve our colonization efforts well.
So the cosmic voyeurs are tuning in now, are they? Well, Parathon, Waterlord of the Underlands, I hope you have a robust return policy on your colonization venture. Because if you're relying on my book to instill panic, you may find that humans are just as likely to ignore impending doom as they are to acknowledge it. Otherwise, I'd be a rich woman, and I wouldn't have to frequent the radio equivalent of Old Whitechapel.
You seem to loathe humans at an intensity near to our own. Would you be interested in joining our cabal? I can offer you Long Island, New York, in return.
Wow, Long Island. That's sudden stretch. You have to do better than that.
Fine. New Zealand, Bali, and a used jet ski. I've only been on it once.
You seem a bit desperate, if you don't mind me saying.
You know, even for a human, you're very rude.
Did I put a crack in your sippy cup?
I am Waterlord of the Underlands, and you will speak with the appropriate decorum.
Not so great and mighty that I ever heard of you. I bet you go walking around with a scepter, don't you?
I wield the Lance of Infinity. Mind your tongue.
Lance. Lance is the name of a brother-in-law, the fella you don't take on a boat for fear he might drown. You don't name an instrument of power after it.
You're the host. Are you not going to step in here? This is outrageous.
Well, actually, we have to sort of wrap things up here, but thanks for the call, Parathon.
You are a gutless coward, the likes of which...
What's next for you, Professor? Could we see an Apocolypse 1984 at booksellers in the coming year?
I never understood the incessant need to know what's next. As if today's calamities aren't engrossing enough. Let's not lose sight of the worm here. There's a matter of payment to be considered before we're done with our business.
Sure, we normally handle that off air, though. Let me transfer you to Yuri.
Hold on there, boy. There won't be no transferring. I told you people I'd do this damn show for you, but it won't be easy on your pocketbook. You bring your fancy radio-making equipment and your factory-made wingtips, all intended to spread your seed, and then you try to get real cheap on the locals, don't you? But it ain't gonna go pleasant like that. Maybe the gynecologist who talks to the dead pelvises will take your lousy 30 quid. If you don't want certain of your budgetary practices made more widely known, you'd make that 100 for me in a lick. Capiche?
Well, under normal circumstances, we'd be a hosed-down dog right now, but Yuri, I think Dolores may have gone to the little girl's room. Could you just go through Matthew's pockets? The left one. The left one looks promising. The left one. Dr. Gilmoyle, just stay on the line. We'll get you set up. Folks, tomorrow night, we hand the celestial steering wheel over to none other than bacterial psychologist Carmina Powell-Hurling. She'll be welcoming back an old friend of the program, Montgomery Monk Sanders, the Encino parking shaman. He'll be joining Carmina from an improperly parked late model sedan to be named. We'll have a good 25 minutes of the show, as is standard in automotive rumination and meditation. Mr. Sanders expects at least one listener to be blessed with perpetual free parking, with the proviso that that's limited to Metro Encino and Calabasas, festival events excluded. So check it out. All right, so being so far from home, I have to give thanks to our announcer, Stephanie, failed tennis pro Phil Prather for all of his pre-detainment assistance here, Yuri on the boards, the esteemed Dr. Tasha Gilmoyle, and our special guests, Dolores and Matthew, the latter of whom I'm pretty confident is eventually going to receive the appropriate medical attention. I will be back on the program 2 nights from now following my post-flight lithium powder treatment. Until then, do not allow the ordinary distractions to thwart your search for wisdom and knowledge. All that and more may just be revealed beyond the near horizon. Good night.